Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. My name is Cedar, and today's event will be a clothing workshop with the awesome SebasCreations. So I'm going to pass on over to him, and we will begin.
Oh wow, thank you for that introduction. What's up, guys? As he said, today we're gonna be doing some learning. So take notes, get ready. Um, I I've been designing. Well, I design clothing, 2D clothing specifically on Roblox for I think it's like 3 years total. I stopped recently just because I got busy with college and things like that. But I'm glad to be back here to kind of, show you guys a little bit because I don't feel like there's enough things out there to really teach someone who's just getting into it. So here's our schedule for today. We're gonna start off with a step-by-step kind of like instructional thing on how to make a basic shirt. So this is like a 101 workshop. It's gonna be really basic. We're not gonna get into like the super detailed stuff, but it should be enough to build a nice foundation for you all. Uh, Second, we're going to go back into some of my more complex designs and go layer by layer. And I'm going to kind of explain how I went about making them. So that should be cool. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A if anyone has any questions or if you need any clarification on anything that I said during the actual workshop. So let's hop into it. The first thing you're gonna want to download is the template. So you can download this straight off the Roblox website. This is the link up here. But if you just look up Roblox clothing template on Google, it'll show up. Get it off of the official Roblox website because if you download it off of Google or something, it might be the wrong dimensions and then you wasted your time designing something that's the wrong size. So here you go. We're going to get into this later, but something that's really important when designing 2D clothing is visualizing how the template folds and ends up on the character, especially with R15, which came out a few years ago. So the you have shirts and pants. They're the exact same template. The only difference and the only reason why Roblox provided two here is to show you how they fold separately on this little image here. But they're the same exact template, same dimensions, same everything. You're just looking at it a different way. And when you upload it to the website, you'll specify whether it's shirts or pants, and it'll tell Roblox how to treat it. And we'll talk about that soon. So the next thing, we're just going to do one more thing before we hop into the step-by-step, is that we're going to need texturing. So texturing is something that's really important. It really gives you the finishing touch on your design. It's really hard to create your own one. It's something that's very advanced. It's not something that I would advise a beginner to do, but if you want to, go for it. But we are lucky enough to have this nice developer on the dev forum who created a totally copyright free to use, free to use pack of different styles of texturing and shading that you can download, and they're high res, they're really cool, and I encourage all of you to go ahead and download this pack because this is awesome. Like he said, it's free to use, and you have a lot of different options. Um, yeah, so, all right, so download this pack because we're going to be using it. If you're following this step by step on the recording or something, and let's do this. So, all right, first thing you're going to notice is that this template that I have open here is different from this one just because this one already has all like the middle parts cut out. And by the way, let me just say this before I forget. I'm using Photoshop. That's the software that we're using. Everything that we're going to cover today, I'm sure it can be done in different on most photo editing softwares. I know a lot of people who use Windows prefer Paint.net because it's free. To name a few others, there's a web-free version of Photoshop called Photopea, which some of our salient designers use, which works perfectly fine. So I just happen to have Photoshop, but I will be explaining how to do certain things in different softwares. So we're covering the basics today, so that shouldn't be a problem. All right, so yeah, I cut out all the little middle parts here from the design because that's where the actual shirt is going to go. And I just recolored like the surrounding area. This doesn't really matter. That's just a personal preference that I hold. You can do that by doing some sort of color overlay and then using the magic wand tool or like a rectangular selection to cut out this. Just make sure you're being precise with your cuts and that you're not cutting into the template or out of the template so that you don't have any like leftover green or red showing up. But yeah, this is the template. It's the same thing. It's the same size. It's a pretty small file just because they're low res, but you know, just make sure you have that. It's like 580. Look it up. It's like 580 by 540 or something like that. Or no, it's a square, so it should be like 585 by 585. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, so here we go. Let's start by making a shirt. So what we're going to be making today is a t-shirt, so a short sleeve with a logo in the middle. So kind of like we can envision this as being merchandise for a game or for your group or something like that, or maybe you're doing a commission and someone wants something. So the first thing we're going to do when we hop into here is create a shape. So I would suggest, I wouldn't suggest, I would implore you to do everything under the template because you're not going to have spillage if it's under the template. So we're going to start off by creating a shape. So most photo editing, if not all photo editing softwares have this, where you can just create a shape like as a circle, a triangle, a polygon, rectangle, whatever. And so we're going to start off by creating a rectangle. So let's visualize this. This is the torso, and then these are the arms, okay? This is the left arm, and this is the right arm. So to make a shirt, we want to cover the whole torso, and since we're doing a short sleeve, we want to, you know, if this is an arm, we want to get like a third of the way there. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's start off by making this a white shirt with no stroke, and then here we go. So I'm creating the shirt here, and this is about 2/3 of the way there. It looks good for a short sleeve, so we're gonna create that shape. All right, we have this shape, but it still doesn't look like a shirt. And this is where what I said earlier about visualizing what it's gonna end up looking like comes into play. It's something that takes practice. If you're ever doubting what something is gonna look like once it's uploaded to the website, you can test it on Roblox Studio, and there's a bunch of tutorials for that online. But yeah. Okay, next thing we're gonna want on this is a collar. And since Photoshop is a pain in the butt, we need to rasterize the layer before we cut a hole into it. And if your software does the same, then do that. Okay, and if that didn't make any sense to you, don't worry, because you probably don't need to worry about it. All right, so I'm gonna do an elliptical selection here, and I'm just gonna kind of like guess what a collar should look like. It's really about like doing it a few times, seeing which one comes out best, see how I'm like redrawing it because I'm not liking how it's coming out. And to be honest, I used to worry about centering it. I just eyeball it now, especially since I feel like I have enough experience to know if it's centered or not. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if it looks good, right? But you can center if you want, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to worry about making it perfectly on center. Okay, so that looks good. Just to guide you through here, this is the top of the torso, so this is going to be like where the head is. So the head is going to be covering most of this. We're just putting a hole in it just in case they have a really small head and you can see it. And that's something you have to consider for different kind of avatar styles. And then this right here is like the little neckline, the little collar that's going to appear on the chest area of the torso. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with this shape. You can, keep trying, make sure you get one that you like, but I'm pretty satisfied, so I'm going to go ahead and press delete to cut a hole into it. All right, let's zoom out, see where we're at. Okay, Looking good to me. Another thing I would mention right now, there's two kinds of things that we can do here. And I know that a lot of people use paint.net, so I'm just going to cover this. There's a setting called anti-alias. And depending on whether it's enabled or disabled, you're going to get either a harsh kind of selection. Here, I'll show you an example. You're going to get a harsh selection. See, here's the anti-alias. We turn it off. There, boom. So when it's off, you're going to get that kind of harsh edges. Some people like that. I don't. So I'm going to turn it on. And when you turn on anti-alias, once again, most photo editing softwares have this feature. When you turn it on, it kind of like fades the pixels to make it smoother. So I like to have it on. You could have it off if you want, but I just wanted to mention that because a lot of people don't know that that's a thing. All right, so there's our collar. It's looking good now, but not too good. So the next thing I typically do with these kinds of things is that I add a texture to the actual shape that is our shirt. And there's different ways you can do this. I normally start by adding noise. So on Photoshop, you go up to Filter, Noise. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go Noise, and then go Add Noise. And then again, Paint.net has this. You might need to download a plugin depending on the software you have, but I promise you'll be able to figure it out. Noise is pretty basic. And I add noise here. So now it's starting to look like actual fabric and not just a bunch of white pixels. If realism is what you're going for. And we're going to assume that's what we're going for on this one right here. So you can play around with this. A lot of people might go like, oh, the more the better, right? Let's go to like 15 and make it look like that. I disagree. I think when it comes to design, a lot of what ends up working is like the subtlety. So I go like, I'm going to go as low as I think like 5. So you can barely see it, barely make it out, but it's just enough for you to see that it's not a white shirt. See, it's like made of fabric. Because real fabric isn't pure white. Nothing in real life is pure white. So there you go. That's the noise. It kind of like adds little darker pixels throughout. Okay, so it's looking better. Let's go ahead and add in our logo. So you're going to want to get a transparent PNG depending on what you want to be on the shirt, whatever your client wants to be on the shirt. For this tutorial, we're going to use the Roblox Creator Events logo, and we're going to make a shirt for that. So I'm just going to drag and drop this right here. I already had it. And you can see that I actually was practicing this design yesterday. So let's go ahead and disable those effects real quick. All right, so this is our logo here. And as you can see, it came in white. It's not ideal. Typically, if you're going to make a white shirt, you're going to want to ask whoever's logo it is to send it to you in black. But it's fine because we can create a color overlay. And to do that, on Photoshop, you're going to double click on the layer and then go to the effects and then press color overlay. And then you can just like change the color or whatever. It should be the same on Paint.net. It just might be in a different spot of the program. But conceptually, it should be the same. So there we go. We've created a color overlay of black. And yeah, so we made it a black logo on top of the white shirt. The next thing I'm going to do to blend it into the fabric that the noise texture that we created is adjust the opacity. So this is what it looks like at 100%. This is what it looks like at 0. We want to find kind of a sweet spot, whatever we think looks best, to create this. So we can even go, if we're going for a light gray, we can even go as low as like 25. And we see how that, you can see through it. It blends in. But for our purposes, I think we're going to go on the darker side. And when adjusting like numbers, I like to do multiples of 5 just because it simplifies things. You don't have to, it's just a personal preference. And we're just going to, adjust you know, zoom out, see how we're liking it. That's looking better, I think. Let's go a little darker, I think. Let's go to 60 multiples of 5, like I said, or 65. All right, that's cool. I think I'm going to roll with that. So that is our logo right there. The next thing you're going to want to do once you do that is resize it, is what I typically do next. So a lot of people that I see on the website have logos that are like this big on their shirts because they're like, oh yeah, look, you can see it, it's good. But that's not what real shirts are like. And if we're going for more of like a realistic, refined design, we want to make it better. And another thing you have to consider is that with R15, the hip, there's guidelines for this online that you can see, but the hip starts more or less like here. So if the hip starts here and our logo looks like that, the creator events is being cut off and you're not going to be able to read it. And you can test this for yourself by plugging it into Roblox Studio. Okay. So this pink line here is the mathematical center, but since we kind of eyeballed it, I'm going to center it to the collar and not the actual mathematical center. No one's going to notice. It's very subtle. But if you want to mathematically center it, you can. Okay. So I'm going to resize this. I'm going to make it small. Like we said, less is more when it comes to design. And I'm not going to put it in the middle of the shirt, vertically speaking, because like we said, the hip starts here for R15 avatars. And most games now are R15. So I'm going to want to put it around here. And it also, if you notice on real shirts, in real life, if you have a graphic tee, the design isn't vertically centered. You have a lot of leeway down here. So we're going to go with that right there. I'm liking how that's looking. Yeah, that's a good size for me, I think. So we're going to... Let's make it a little bigger. And we're going to leave it there. Let's see. Zoom out. Boom. I like that. I like that. All right. Next thing we're going to do is something that I do with anything I put on a shirt. I like to add a little bit of a drop shadow to it. So I'm going to go back again. In Photoshop, you go to the effects panel. In Paint.net, I don't know if you have an effects panel or... I believe it's a plugin on Paint.net. But I'll show you an alternative way to do it anyways in a second. But we're going to add this drop shadow. And what this does is that we're trying to blend this into the shirt, right? We're not trying to make it look like it's just a PNG on top of another PNG. We want this to look like it's all one cohesive thing. So the shadow kind of helps us do that. It makes it look like it's printed on the actual shirt that we're doing here. So again, we want to be very, very delicate with this, very subtle with it, because we don't want it to look like that, right? Or like that. So I'm going to be very, very careful here. And I'm just going to play around with the different settings until we get something that we like. And a cool thing is that you can disable it and enable it and see the difference it made. This is a little too harsh, so I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit. I feel like it just elevates your design. So there we go. Now that I'm looking at it, I think we want to put this down a little bit. Okay. Looks good to me. Again, this is just a basic shirt, so nothing crazy. All right. Let me talk about an alternative way of making shadow, just in case your software, let me just duplicate this layer. Just in case your software doesn't have a built-in shadow feature or you don't want to download plugins, let me show you an alternative way to do it. So here we go. This is back with no shadow. What you can do is duplicate it, and then the layer that's below it, we can add a blur to it. And I'm pretty positive that you're going to have a blur feature on your photo editing software. And if we add a blur to it, it basically acts exactly like a shadow. Now, the only thing is that since you're adding a layer on top of another one, it's going to darken it a little bit, as you can see. You can deal with that. You can reduce the opacity, and there you go, right? But yeah, that's conceptually, that's just what you want to kind of aim for. A shadow is essentially just a blurred, duplicated version of that. It's just that some softwares have like that shortcut built in. Okay, so I'm liking this. Now we're going to go back to what we talked about at the beginning with the shading that they put on the dev forum, which I highly recommend you go ahead and download. The one I'm going to be using here is the one from the dev forum. So let's go ahead and check that out. So I'm going to drag my shading in here. I already had it set up for this event, but you're going to drag it in to your software, and then you're going to enable it. All right. So it's not going to look like that. Truthfully, it's not going to look like that when you drag it in. It's going to look more like that, okay? And it might even be bigger than it needs to be, at which point you just have to resize it, right? And you don't have to get it exact because we're going to be reducing the opacity as you saw. But you just want to get it more or less there, right? So it's going to look like that. And I don't know about you, but that just looks way too harsh and way too stylized and not realistic at all. And assuming that that's not what we're going for, there's a few things we can do. You can change the blending mode, right? You can play around with these like blending modes that you know are common on photo editing softwares. I keep saying that, but I just want to reiterate it because there was a point where I didn't have Photoshop and I got upset when I saw tutorials that didn't, you know, account for people who didn't have that. So let's just hit it with the normal blending mode, which is what all programs are going to default to. And we can start by just reducing the opacity, right? Again, less is more. So we want to make it very, very, very subtle. I'm liking, like, we can even go as subtle as this, as like 4 or 5. You can go, you know, that's what it looks like at 100. So let's just play around with it, see what we like. I think I'm going to stick with 10. I think I like that. And then if you do have the option to, this looks good, but if you do have the option to go around with blending modes, you can, you know, try different ones. Blending modes are essentially just ways that blacks interact with whites, I believe. I actually don't know like the technical terminology behind that, but yeah. Okay, so it looks good. We have one thing left. You're probably looking at this and you're saying, oh, okay, that's fine, I'm ready to export. Nope. Something that is very a very common mistake that I've done many times is that I forget to, oh, sorry about that. I forget to crop the texture essentially. So what that means for us is that you may have remembered that this shading, when we dragged it in, reached all the way down here because it's assuming you want to do a long sleeve. It's covering the whole thing for you. But we're doing a short sleeve, so we're going to have to cut that out, right? And you can just do this by grabbing a rectangular selection tool and just cutting it off, right? Boom, right there where the shape ends, where the shirt ends. Oh, sorry about that. I had a weird setting on there. Pretend that didn't happen. Yeah. Boom. All right, there we go. So that's the rectangular selection. You're gonna want to cut that out. It's giving me a problem here. Photoshop is weird, guys. If you have Photoshop, you'd know that. If you're on Photoshop and that happened to you, just go up to Layer, Rasterize, and hit Smart Object. And boom. All right, boom. We cut it out. That was more complicated than it needed to be, but you can blame Photoshop for that. I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen on Paint.net. If it does, let me know. All right. So there you go. We cut off this part of the design, so now we no longer have shading on the parts where there is no shirt. But we also have to cut out this part because there's shading here as well. You can't really see it, but it's there. So I'm going to grab another elliptical selection tool. And, you know, there's probably a better way to do this, but I typically just kind of like draw it like that. I'll cut it right there. See, it's not exact, but the opacity on it is so low that you're not going to notice. I think that looks pretty cool. If you want to change the color of the original shirt, go right ahead. However you want to go for that. Well, probably not that dark, right? But we can make it like red, right? We can make it blue. We can make it, you know what I mean? Or if you want to make it like black, right? First of all, never make it fully black on Roblox. It will come out, Roblox darkens everything. So I would suggest if you want to go for black, go for like that kind of gray. And then the only thing you want to do here is just obviously change the color of the main design to white or something like that. Right? So there we go. And you might want to consider making the shading darker, but I think that looks good for now. All right. So that was the end of our step-by-step. I'm going to pass it back off to Cedar real quick. And yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for that amazing tutorial. I hope that helped everyone. As Sebas already mentioned, he's now going to look into sort of past clothing items he's made and sort of break them down into a sort of showcase of the different items he's made. So I'm going to pass it back over to him.
All right, cool. If I was unclear about anything, by the way, throughout the whole process, please use the Q&A to ask me questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, let's move on. So as you know, I have experience creating clothing from before, and I have a lot of stuff in my portfolio. So I'm gonna go through some of my old, more intricate designs, and like Cedar said, break down how I went about it. All right, so let's go on to this one called the Lux Polo that I did a while back. Now, the first thing you're going to notice here that pops out to you is like, oh my gosh, the template looks completely different. That's just my way of branding my work because, I have to send it into Discord servers to get it uploaded, and I want, people to know that it's my design. You don't need to worry about that if you're just starting out. You can make a custom template if you want to, but I want to make sure that you know that this is the same thing as that. It's just fancier, right? Like it looks a little nicer. In fact, some people like working in these because it's less distracting to the eye and you can see like the colors better. But just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay, so a couple things here. What we just went over about creating the shape, cutting out the sleeves, cutting out the collar, it's all the same here. The only difference is that we're adding more details to the design. And in this case, those details would be the collar. And I'm going to explain to you how I did that for a second, but let's disable the collar, right? And if we disable the collar, we can see that this and that are basically pretty much the same. Like if you know how to make this, you can probably know how to make this, right? This is just a different shaped collar, but it's like the same. For this little salient logo here, I applied the same principles that I taught you to apply here. So we got that out of the way. It's the same thing. See, there's like shading, right? The salient logo, you see it has the color overlay and the drop shadow just like we talked about. And then this is just a shape, right? Matter of fact, if we disable the template, we can see that it's literally just a big rectangle with a hole cut out and a salient logo. So it's not, it might seem daunting to a beginner, but it's not as hard as it seems. What is a little tricky is the details of the collar. And to do the collar, first of all, you need to have an understanding of how collars, work. So if you want to grab a polo in real life and see what it looks like, or look up pictures online, do that. But the way I did this is by using the line tool, or the pen tool, to create a line. So I know for a fact Paint.net has this, which is free, by the way. I keep plugging it, but that's just because I know most people aren't going to want to pay for Photoshop just to make Roblox clothing. So I just want to get that out of the way. So you can use the pen tool to create curves and stuff. On Photoshop, they separate the pen tool from the curve pen tool. It might be the same way for Paint.net. I'm not fully sure. Or whatever you're using. If you're using Photopea, for example, it's the exact same thing as Photoshop. So okay, I'm fooling around here. By the way, name your layers, guys, because name your layers and organize them into folders because it will save you a lot of time in the long run. All right, so what I did here is I just created a line. So I'm going to set the stroke to black, and then I'm not going to give it a fill just to make a line. And to create these details here, you're literally just making a thin line, right? And what you're doing with that line, let's make it thinner than that actually. What you're doing with that line is the same thing that we did with the logos. We're adding a shadow, or like we said, you can add a blur, right? And we're reducing the opacity. See? That is essentially the same thing as that. It's what I did to make this design. The only difference, obviously, is that you're creating a different shape for this. And that you're starting to get more advanced into more advanced territory there. So I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to get into that. But at least conceptually, you now know that that's how it works. And for the buttons, it's the same thing. I'm going to make an elliptical shape. Make a little, so I'm going to make it bigger so you can see. Make a little circle. Set the fill to white. Add a tiny black border. And then give it a shadow. And then if we resize that, that's how I made the button. Okay? And then we can even make the stroke smaller. Oh, I was on the wrong layer. All right, so there you go. And that's how I made the button. Oops. Okay. So, like I said, I'm not going to get into the details here. We can do that in another workshop, but that's at least how you're supposed to think about it going into making something like this. All right. Next up, we have a really advanced design here. This took a while. This is one of my more advanced designs, but it's cool because once I had this template done, I could make a bunch of suits by just recoloring the jacket and the shirt and things like that. So yeah, once again, we're thinking about this the same way as we thought about this. At the end of the day, it's literally just a big shape with details on it. And in this case, since it's a jacket over a shirt, it's two shapes on top of each other, right? They're separate entities. And if you pay close attention, this is the reused collar from this, right? Why make it again? I already made a collar for this design, so I just copied it over to this file. So, that's just a way, once you start building a portfolio of designs, you can start reusing them and you're going to have to do less work. But, yeah. The difference here is just more details. Let's add the shading back on. The jacket is just another shape on its own, right, with holes cut into it. So the collar is bigger. You have the little end here. And then this is the same thing about the lines that we talked about, where you just make a line, reduce its opacity, and add a drop shadow. And once again, the only tricky part there is nailing the shape. It's going to take a few tries, but that's just how it is. And then you can make little details again with the shape tool and the pen tool. You just make I made like a little triangle for the handkerchief, and a little circle for the button, a little curved, this I believe is just a rectangle with curved edges on top of a black rectangle to make the belt. And another thing you should know is that like the shape layer that I cut the hole out from, like the golden one on the suit, I added a drop shadow, and you can see subtly that adds depth to the design because it adds this little shadow here that makes it look like it's sitting on top. So Seriously, just with reducing the opacity and adding a drop shadow, you can do so much and make things look so realistic. Yeah, and it's pretty easy to learn. So the tie is the same thing. It's just, shapes. For the tie, though, I added an inner shadow. So instead of it being the shadow being outside of the shape, it goes inside of the shape to give it kind of like a 3D shape. And then if you can see here, like the vertical and horizontal lines as the texture, that's just a specific texture that I downloaded for the suit. This is linen, right? So I put that and the shading together to make this look realistic. And the linen I got from a website called transparenttextures.com. There you go. Free game right there. I get a lot of my textures from there, and they're free. And they have a lot of different options. They have a search bar. You can get a lot of cool stuff from there. Same thing with these details right here. The only, now it's like a long sleeve. So I created the shape to go be a long sleeve. And then the last thing I want to talk about here is you can see how the belt kind of like extends into the bottom of the torso. The reason I did that is because when testing this in game or in Roblox Studio, without this little black rectangle extending, you could see where the design folded onto the character. There's like a weird cutoff, and you can tell that it wasn't a real belt, I guess, and it didn't look good. So my solution to that was literally just extending the black belt so that the design would read and it'd continue when it folds. And this, you're not going to notice this because the player has legs. That's just a nitpicky thing, and that just goes to show why you should be testing your designs before you upload them. All right, the last design we're going to go over is something that a lot of people do wrong, in my opinion. And that is shoes, okay? Shoes are, I think, the most difficult clothing item to make because it applies everything that we talked about to an extreme. But it's still possible, and I'm going to show you how. So we're looking at the template different now because we're going to upload this as a pants, not as a shirt. So now, instead of these being the arms, these are the legs now. This continues to be the torso. You don't have to put anything on there. You can, some people do that, but I don't. If it's pants, I'm only looking at this right here. Okay. So, shoes are a lot more intricate, and it would take hours to show you how to make these. But like I said, I'll show you the basics. So, as you can see, I have all these layers here. They're all open. They're in groups and they're named. So that's good. The main thing I want you to see is that I'm just going to try to disable. Okay. I'm trying to disable the lines. Yeah. So with all those little details disabled, you can see that once again, this is literally just a shape that I cut out. And once again, how do you cut it out? You just have to understand how shoes work, right? Shoes typically have this little thing on the back. They dip down and they have the tongue with the laces. And this will fold in on itself to create like a rectangular prism. So I created a golden shape. I cut it out. I added noise just like we did here, right? I added noise. And I did another shape on top of that that's gray to be the sole. And I did a drop shadow, like we said. And I added the details. And the details, which I just disabled, which are right here, it's the same thing as before. It's just the pen tool, right? It's just a line. It's just a very thin black line with reduced opacity and a drop shadow. Now, with shoes, you have stitching, right? But you can use the same pen tool to make that. And instead of making a straight line, you can go to your settings and make a dotted line, right? And you just want to make a thin dotted line. With reduced opacity. Oops. I lost where that went. But it's the same thing that we talked about. You just make a dotted line, reduce the opacity, around 25, you can start there, and add a drop shadow. And it will look from a distance like it's a part of the shoe and like it's a 3D item. And you can design it to how you want it. Another difficult part here is the laces. Laces, it is probably what took me the longest to understand how they work. But essentially, it's just, you start off with this shape right here. Again, you draw this with the pen tool. The pen tool is your best friend when it comes to this. You draw like a zigzag with a pen tool like that, make it white, add a drop shadow like we talked about, add a drop shadow to everything. And duplicate, you're going to want to duplicate that and flip it horizontally on top of itself and add another drop shadow to make it look like 3D. And then you're going to want to draw the loop, right, for the top of the laces. And I did this again with the curvature pen tool. I did like a little shape like that, and I adjusted it to my liking. So that's going to take you a bit to get. The other important part is that you want to do it on top of a tongue. Shoes have a tongue that look like that. And this, again, is literally just a shape that I created using the pen tool, right? And I made the middle dark and then the outside lighter, like that, more or less, right? And I added noise and an inner shadow to the inside to make it work. So yeah, now these are just shoes. In Salient, we treat shoes as their own thing, but you're going to want to upload them with pants. I'm not going to show the pants that we use just because they're not mine, and I don't want them to just be out there. But you're going to want to just add pants to this. Very rudimentary, right? You just add like pants look like that. And it's the same idea, guys. It's just a shape with details on top, with shadows and lines and things like that. Okay? All right. That is a lot for a Basics 101 class or workshop. If you guys are interested in seeing a more advanced one, you can let us know and we'll configure that out, I guess. But as of right now, I am going to pass it off back off to Cedar, and we're going to probably jump into the Q&A, I think.
Yep, we are indeed. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to share them. I have a couple questions prepared as well. So while everyone can type whatever answers they have, I'll ask the first question. So one of the questions I have for you is, on all of the templates, there's that sort of white outline on everything, and I wanted to ask, is there a reason behind that, or does it matter, or what's the reason for it being there?
Which, you mean this white template here, like this?
Yeah, it's a sort of big white box, I guess.
So that's an interesting point, because some people they would upload it like that, and you don't need that. I use it as a guideline, just to know kind of where the design is going to fold, and when I'm applying my shading, to know where to kind of like line it up, because the shading will have those lines in it, as we can see. I'll show you right now. If we disable this shading has those lines to it. So I use it as kind of like a tool to measure and visualize where the template is going to fold on Roblox. Now, It's interesting that you mentioned that because the smart thing to do in that case would be to, okay, you're designing, you visualize it, and then you export it like that, just to make sure they're like the white lines don't bleed into the design, which is something that has happened to me before. I guess it's just a matter of habit that I started out by uploading them like this, also as a way of branding the design. But you can totally upload it like that. You don't have to do it. I just use it as a tool for measurement. And yeah, and if it's not exactly 2 pixels, it will show up in the design. It needs to be 2 pixels. This will, that will not be, according to Roblox, they will fold here and they won't show the 2 pixels. But just to be certain, yes, you can disable it. But to answer your question, it's just a guideline for me, so I can visualize where it's going to fold.
Fair enough. Okay, awesome. One of the questions I can see in the chat is, how did you become so awesome? I'm guessing that's how did you become awesome in making clothing, but
How did
yeah.
I become so awesome? Well, first of all, I'm flattered. If we're going to take this as how did I become so awesome at making clothing, I was always interested in graphic design. When the pandemic started, I wanted to get more into it, and I was playing a lot of Roblox during the pandemic, as I think a lot of us were. And I started playing the game Universal Roblox, and I saw that they had a bunch of clothes, and I was like, man, I want to learn how to make this. I think I even asked one day in the chat, like when I was like 15, like however many years ago that was, like, oh, how do I become a clothing designer here? And I was told, like, well, you need to be really good and you need to learn, and I didn't know how to at the time. So I joined Salient, which is the clothing group that makes the clothing for Universal, and I started experimenting, watching some tutorials online, making my own one. And I uploaded them to the Salient like off-topic channel for the owners to see, which at the time were Ryan and Uncommon. And they eventually offered me a spot at their designer and training program. And that is where essentially I learned how to make clothes, and how to use Photoshop and graphic design. Ryan and Uncommon taught me. They provided a lot of helpful feedback, provided a lot of assignments, kept me disciplined. So I would say that, I joined Salient in the designer and training program, which you can join, you can apply to be, so you can get the same education that I was given. And aside from that, guys, it's just, people say this all the time, but it's just hard work and dedication. And Salient helped me maintain, like, keep that discipline, right, of practicing making designs like 3 times a week at least. So yeah, design every day and join Salient. That's how I became so awesome. So thank you for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's certainly a good answer for it. Okay, so one of the other questions was, what inspired you to make a t-shirt design? So, for example, where do you get your ideas from about what you're going to make?
Oh, okay. So, a lot of times for the Universal stuff, if I'm gonna go, so I'm gonna start with saying Universal. Universal is like if we're making a new ride, obviously, or something like that. In which case, that's like working with a client, quote unquote, in which they give you specific designs that they provide to you to work off of. But I'm imagining that's not the case for most people. So, for Salient, man, I just, inspiration comes from everywhere. I mean, it can be off something that someone's wearing in a movie or a TV show, or something that you saw in a clothing store in real life, or some clothing piece that you own, or some design you see on Pinterest, right? Inspiration comes from everywhere, and you can't really force it. The only thing you can do is consume more more media and go out into the world and see things, see more things. And inspiration will come from anywhere. I know that my whole suit, all the suits I made, they started from an idea off a movie that I saw, which was Tenet, directed by Christopher Nolan. The main character there always wore suits all the time, and I was like, damn, those are cool. Or dang, sorry. um, and and yeah, that's where I started the suits, and then the polos came from there as well. So like I said, clothing items in real life, other clothing on Roblox, movies, TV shows, album covers, what Pinterest is a good tool to find inspiration. Yeah, comes from everywhere, man. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where I get my things from, but there you go.
Fair enough. Okay. I'm going to ask a difficult question
Oh,
now.
brother. Okay.
And the question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses in making clothing for Roblox?
That's a great question. Um, I'll start off with my weaknesses, I guess. Let me think here. Okay. One of my biggest weaknesses, I think, is that once I started making a lot of clothes, I would just reuse a bunch of old templates to redo them. So once I was like a year in to making clothes, I think I rarely made anything new. Like I just reused templates, recolored them. Like you saw, I used the collar from the polo on the suits, and there's nothing wrong with that inherently, right? Like don't double the work if you don't have to. But I didn't really challenge myself. Sometimes, I'd just be lazy and not want to make anything new because, oh, I already have this. Where if I had made something new specific to the item I was creating, it would have probably come out better. So I would say that my biggest weakness is sometimes being lazy and not challenging myself enough. And I think if you challenge yourself, you'll truly truly get better. And as for my strengths, I mean, I think number one thing is experience. The more you do something, the more you know it, obviously, and the more you do something, the higher your standards are, and it's easier for you to tell when something could be improved upon. Like we said, a lot of people on this one had the logo huge or just slapped it on there and called it a day or forget to cut the shading off, right? So simply, my experience with all of this is my biggest strength because I know when something could look better. And that kind of ties into my weakness too, because sometimes I know something could look better, but I still don't do it because I don't challenge myself. But yeah.
Okay, awesome. One more question from another person, which you'll know as the Uncommon. His question is, how has graphic design helped influence you and crossed into other artistry projects you make?
Yeah. I mean, I use graphic design literally all the time. Literally all the time. I'm a film student. I go to a film school. And there I have opportunities all the time to use the skills I learned over the past few years making stuff for Roblox to create film posters, little booklets, social media posts, things like that. Graphic design is something that's in really high demand right now. A lot of people want things to be made, especially in the era of social media marketing and things like that. People are always looking for someone to design something for you. And having that skill has been extremely helpful because whenever someone says, hey, I need this done, I can step up and say I can do that, and I can do that well. And so far, it's been great, like I said, in film school, creating my posters and things like that. And I'm looking into ways I can make that into a profession to actually, make money off of it. And that has been extremely helpful. And the other thing is just, it's not just graphic design. I mean, it teaches you about art and having high standards and being disciplined, right, and being motivated. Like like I said, I make films primarily. Um, Even with like titles, a lot of films have titles like it says like, oh, create, like directed by, or in the credits, right? You use um the same theory to make that look good. So aside from being a useful skill that a lot of people need in today's world, it also just helped me become a better artist overall with higher standards and more discipline and have, a keener creative eye.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, making films, and you've been doing that for quite a while. From what I've seen, they look really good.
Oh, thank you.
Um, okay, so moving on to one of my questions, and the question I have for you is sort of, what was the first graphic you remember making, whether it was on Roblox or just in general?
Ooh,
What did you start with?
ooh, that's a good one. So I started on Canva, and Canva's a great tool. I'm sure you might know what it is. A lot of people might know what it is that are watching. It's basically just a web designer. It's very basic. A lot of the designs are like pre-made templates, but it taught me a lot about like the principles of graphic design. So a lot of people hate on it, but I think it's a good way to get started out. But I started on Canva, and I think my first graphics that I made were for my films, like promotional content or like thumbnails or posters. They were horrible, obviously. Um, but yeah, I think I made the reason I got into graphic design was for my film stuff. Yeah, man, I'm trying to remember. It was probably a movie poster or something like that. I don't remember for what though, and I don't even know if I have it still. But yeah, dang, good questions.
Well, I think that's everything. I'm just double checking through everything we have. Okay, it's the last question I have, and then if there's no other ones, then we can finish. Have you ever had any plans to make sort of real life clothing using the graphics you've made? Because you've done loads of logos and loads of different shirt designs. Have you thought about making it real?
Yeah, a few months ago, I actually started creating designs and plans for a real life clothing brand, and I actually even ordered a mock up. I have a few shirts. That was put on pause because I got pretty busy over the summer and I couldn't really continue doing that. But it's funny you mentioned that because over the past few days, now that I'm on winter break, I've been thinking of ways to get that started up again. So I will totally, let you guys know if that happens. But yeah, I have, I have had plans and they're in the works currently. So good question.
Enough. Awesome. Okay. I think that's everything we have then.
All right.
Yeah, okay. So I want to give you a massive well done for making the awesome tutorial, and I want to thank you for joining me for this event today. And if anyone else wants to do another event like this or have another clothing workshop, then feel free to share any ideas and we could do it again.
Of
So do you have
course.
anything else?
I just want to say, thank you for having me. I'm always glad to do this, to show people how to do things, and join Salient.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for joining, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Cool. Bye.